Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for making space and letting me have an opportunity to be a part of this community. I'm really excited for the work that you all are doing, the journey that you're on, and the conversation that we get to have today. I have to share my Chitra story before I share any prepared comments, because I think it's a perfect setup to the value that communities can provide. So almost 20 years ago, fresh out of grad school, first job I took was at Charles Schwab. And I remember very distinctly sitting in the marketing department, and I had to make a pitch for a product that we were working on. And so I did my best. I, put this, PowerPoint deck together. And my boss was like, this really isn't it. And she was like, look, you need a little bit of help. I'm going to give you this deck that everyone uses all over. And the former head of strategy used this. And lo and behold, I get in my email this deck, and it's like the Chitra Nayak PowerPoint deck. In it, it has every slide template you can imagine on how to make stories come to life with numbers and charts and graphs. So I used this deck and I re-swizzled everything. We got no problem, everyone loved the story that we were telling after that. So that became my lucky deck. So I kept the deck with me with the template. Even when I left Schwab, went on to Sephora for 12 years, guess who also got the Chitra Nayak deck? Everyone on my team. So everyone on my team had it. And I promise you, for some reason, I did not quite notice in the footer that it says Chitra Nayak. And so literally at Sephora today, I'm sure there are some amazing documents that still exist with Chitra Nayak in the footer. So I say all that to say that when you're really good at something, share it. Make sure other people know it, they have it, because you never know what impact it can have to help someone's overall development. So with that, I say thank you, Chitra. I'm so glad we ended up actually getting to meet for real a month, 2 months ago. And again, super excited to be in conversation today. So we're going to spend some time talking about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is around inclusion. And it's framed in a value that we have at Box called bring your blank self to work. So we're going to talk about sort of what that means, what are some of the ways that we make that happen, and hopefully there will be some overlaps for those of you who are focusing on this in the talent management space, and for all of us as we think about our careers going forward. Before I jump into that value specifically, I want to take a step back and tell you a little bit about Box, because hopefully you'll see kind of how this value sort of is an extension of that. So for those of you not familiar with Box, we are a cloud content management company, and our mission is to power how the world works together. We basically make it easy for companies to share and collaborate in the cloud, and we also make it really secure for them to do that. That helps in how they interact with each other. So within a company, talking to your employees, making it easy to collaborate, but also with their customers. So we're really excited that we really get to work with over 100,000 customers, and we're sort of the brand behind the brand, making it easier for them to get their work done. So we love that we get to support products and verticals that we love, whether it's a Pixar or a Nike, or my personal favorite, Beyonce. We're really proud to make it easy for them to get their work done and make it easy for them to do that safely and securely. So that's a little bit about what we do. But I also want to introduce you to our culture. If there are 3 things that we're known for at Box, it would of course be our cloud content management platform, our CEO, who I love, and if you follow him on Twitter, it's just such a delight. He is an incredible leader, and he always has something very interesting to say. So Aaron Levy. And then the 3rd thing we're known for is our culture. So let me introduce you a little bit to Box. Okay, so that's a little introduction to our culture. So I want to make sure that as we're talking about belonging, that it's wrapped in sort of this context of sort of how we get to bring that to life. We have about 2,000 employees. We're spread out over 10 countries, and you saw our offices. And then we also have quite a few folks pre-pandemic who are working remotely. So us kind of building this mission of having thriving communities inside and out is a big part of the work that I get to do with my team. And certainly, if you can imagine us all 100% moving virtually, it brought up new opportunities for us to make sure that we're continuing to keep that culture alive. But if I had to explain what I do for a living in a tweet, this would be it. Our team helps to build thriving communities inside and out. We get to do this by focusing on 3 key areas: how we create healthy boxers, healthy organizations, and healthy communities. So when I think about healthy boxers, it's really about really understanding how we can help support their onboarding experience, how to make sure that they're really properly set up in their roles, that when we think about development and giving them opportunities to build and grow their skills, that there is access for everyone. And then when we think about career pathing and where they want to go and grow in the future, that we have systems in place to help to reinforce that. When we think about healthy organizations, that's really thinking about the practices that really make sure that we have successors that are ready to go. So as we continue to move and grow, that we're always thinking about that we have the right org structures and teams in place. And so we look at things like spans and number of folks on teams to help make sure that that's in place. We also look at how we think about performance and what performance should look like. How do we measure that? How do we know that we're going after that? And how do we think about goal setting just to make sure at the end of the day, we're able to hit all of our business metrics. And then lastly, our team thinks about healthy communities. And so we think about that inside and out. Inside, we really think about everything from what you saw in the video. How do we think about culture? How do we think about belonging? How do we think about things like our opportunities to engage outside of your work? So employee resource groups, employee interest communities. We also think about belonging specifically, and we have an experience survey that helps us measure that. And then we also think externally as well. How do we make our inside organization mirror the outside and how we work with our partners and nonprofit organizations? We're really proud we have 9,500 nonprofit organizations who utilize Box to help get their work done. So how do we make sure that we're creating a community for them as well? And then how does this all, of course, support our philanthropic giving? So that is the work that our team gets to do. I'm part of a much bigger band, but this isn't a big part. That context hopefully will help set up the next part of this conversation. So one of the values that I think really wraps everything that we do sort of in this conversation is one that we call bring your blank self to work. Everything that I showed you on the previous slide wouldn't be possible if we did not have a mindset that's oriented towards inclusion. And so one of the things that we get to think about is how do you sort of take an idea that sometimes feels pretty abstract around inclusion and really help to bring that to life in our practices, our systems, and also what boxers, we call ourselves boxers, with the experience every day. And so that gets us to this value that's called bring your blank self to work. Now, I could explain to you what this is, but I want to show a parallel example of what I think this looks like when it's really working well. And part of it really goes into thinking about all the things that might make us feel different. How might we leverage those in a way that helps drive top performance and helps to create an incredible culture? So like I said, I'm going to show you an example of what I think when I think about bring your blank self to work, what it could potentially look like.
UCLA gymnast pulled out all the stops during her floor routine that not only helped her team win the meet, but also managed to go viral.
They do these big tumbling passes and then put on a show in between. Stop that, Landon.
Yes, she did. Sofina De Jesus did the whip, the nene, and hit the twan during the competition in between amazing flips and tumbles. She ended her incredible routine with the dab.
Combination. Wow. Sure.
Judges gave the 21-year-old senior a near perfect score of 9.925 for the performance. Sofina not only won over the crowd, she also helped her team bring home a victory.
Yes, she did.
Be sure to watch Inside of.
Okay. So when I think about bring your blank self to work, and when it's really working, a few things are true. A, you know the rules of the game and how to play them. B, you have your technical performance and all of those skills, but you also get to bring who you are, your unique experiences, backgrounds, and you can bring it all together so that you can achieve even greater heights. And you get to do it in a community where you're actually supported. What I love about Sofina's story is that she was a senior, and this was the last routine that she did in her senior year. And she had been working on this routine for a long time, but she had to think about how to make sure that it hit all the technical aspects that were required. She also had to think about how to perfect it and perfect her craft. But she needed the support of her team. She needed the support of her leader to help really make sure that that all came together. And boy, when it came together, you got to see that. So this was from years ago. So this was probably like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. This was really disruptive in the world of gymnastics at the time, to bring all of these different styles. But she felt like it was an important moment to really push gymnastics further. And now you're seeing it all the time. People are bringing a lot of aspects to who they are into a sport that has been pretty like for most of our history with gymnastics. So really excited to see what we can do when we as individuals feel like we can bring the best of who we are and really channel it into work so that we're able to achieve higher heights and so that our businesses are able to go further. And so that's what I think it looks like when you're able to bring your blank self to work. But keeping it real, we know that it's not as easy to do that. And I think for many of us, we would like to say, similar to Sofina, that we sit on teams where people really invite us to bring different aspects of who we are into doing our work. But the real reality is that many of us still struggle with something that has actually been coined as covering. And so a sociologist, Erwin Goffman, sort of coined this phrase of covering and defined it with this definition that you see on the screen. So whether we're talking about race, gender, sexual orientation, it could be wealth disparities, we all engage in these practices where we might downplay certain aspects of who we are that might push us outside of the mainstream. And when that is the case, we have to think about what is the actual impact when that happens? What happens when we say that we're going after diversity and we're bringing in all of this top talent from unique backgrounds, only to find that they come in and they don't feel like they're in a space where they're able to draw into that? And so I'm sure, as we can all guess, it causes harm. Many of us who go into work environments and feel like we have to cover or mute certain aspects of who we are, it's exhausting. And so there's a lot of studies that have gone into what happens when you're in an environment where you have to cover. And so some of the research you see on the screen. So basically 2/3 of employees experience some aspect of having to cover at work. And when you think about underrepresented talent specifically, it's much, much worse. And when you have to cover all of the time, or you have to spend great portions of your day having to contort yourself to fit in, it's very much in the research that it causes detriment to your overall sense of self and overall output. And a lot of inclusion efforts. So there's a lot that when you think about D&I in companies, so much work goes into recruiting and not enough goes into this side of the house, which is really thinking about creating inclusive environments. And so that is something that I think it sucks. I think it sucks for a variety of reasons. It's just exhausting. I don't even need to take a straw poll of this group, but I'm sure that we've all been in that situation where we feel like we have to hold back a certain part or element or aspect of who we are. it also stifles innovation. So even from a purely capitalistic point of view, companies need to be thinking about this, because if you really want to push your best thinking forward, if you want to push your best ideas, develop your best products, it won't happen in a room where people don't feel comfortable sharing and expressing their points of view, or even drawing access to other parts of who they are. And to that end, it also limits problem solving. And it also, in certain organizations, it magnifies blind spots. You know, in the tech industry, we have to think about that. It's a pretty homogenous culture. And so if you're not addressing things because people don't feel comfortable speaking up, it means that it just persists. So we have to be really, really careful. And then also it limits perspective. So it's one of those things that we all have to grapple with, which is, how should we think about identity? So this beautiful lady that you see here, this is my grandmother. And so when I think about identity and some of the unique things that I access and bring to work every day, I would be remiss to not think about this woman, my grandmother. She was someone who worked incredibly hard as a single mother, raising 4 children in the most impoverished neighborhood in Louisville, Kentucky, and had to do it on her own. Even though she didn't have access to lots of resources, she had a clear vision for her family and what she wanted to see happen for her children and the exposure that she wanted them to have. And so she worked extremely hard to make sure that she leveraged every resource in the community to make sure that her 4 kids had everything that was humanly possible for her to provide for them. And so though in her lifetime, she never had that opportunity to walk across a college stage, she certainly was excited to see that most of her kids were able to do that. And a couple of them went on to become, to go through their own graduate programs and become attorneys. So she was able to get a lot done because of her vision and because of how hard she pushed. That is an important part of my identity that I bring to work every day. I know that talent isn't based on a zip code. And I know that certain people have access to more things than others. And so I bring my grandmother with me to work every day, because in the work that I do around inclusion and wanting to make sure that we're making space for everyone, I have to look at it from an equity lens and recognize that not everyone is starting on from the same starting line. How do I know that? That's literally my family story. And so if I came to work and had some sort of hesitation to bring that orientation into how I problem solve or how I tackle the work in front of me, I don't think that Box would be getting the best of my skills and experience. And so it's important for each of us to really lean into our stories, lean into our identity, lean into our upbringing, lean into the good, I call it the duality, the wonderful things that have happened to us, as well as the challenging things that have happened to us, where and how we got our education, some of those life lessons that we bring, because the companies that we work for, or the companies that will start, all of it needs that sort of full access in order to help do our best problem solving. Because if 2020 had taught us any lessons at all, the lesson that it taught us is that this isn't business as usual. There are probably people who have worked, if I take my industry, just in tech alone, with building products, and they built them all not realizing the amazing amount of challenge that we were going to step into. And if we didn't have full access to all of our unique experiences and backgrounds, I don't know how many businesses would be able to push forward. If we look at the impacts that COVID has had in terms of people's ability to just stay healthy, their abilities to come to work, the actual business models that were based on us having human-to-human contact that have been disrupted. We need the diversity of thinking and problem solving to really help address those issues. When we think about the issues that have happened around the racial and social injustices that have just been magnified over the last year, when we think about the challenges that we've had around systemic racism that have been in place, not new to 2020, but certainly have been magnified, especially with the lens and context of positions of power and authority. These are huge issues that have happened that again have left a lot of companies flat-footed. And so if we're not able to pull through some of those unique experiences that we have, how might we approach problem solving to be able to move that work forward and think about what we want to do within our own organizations and space? And then if I think about the challenges that have happened with us all having to work virtually, and also for some people who have had to literally exit the workforce, how do we even think about some of those unique challenges that have opened up that have really created a huge point of pain for caregivers of all sorts and sizes, but particularly with parents and children, and the sandwich generation who are taking care of maybe their parents as well. How might we be able to solve some of these problems without having access to some of these diverse experiences that make us who we are? So one of the things that we've really thought about with this value of bring your blank self to work is really thinking about how we create a climate that makes it easy and easier for people to be authentic and to be real and bring who they are. How might we make space for people to be vulnerable? And I know that sometimes that feels really difficult sometimes, being able to speak openly about a challenge or an issue or a unique vantage point that we might bring, but it's so important to the problem solving that we have yet to do. We also need to be brave sometimes, and not so brave where we push ourselves maybe too far out, but brave enough that we feel comfortable having a conversation and maybe carrying some of the conflict that can go along with that sometimes, or the tension, but being okay with that. And then also being supportive. How do we make sure that we are open to experiences that are very different from our own? I think that one of the things that, again, when I think about it with the lens of the pandemic, there were a lot of issues that people just didn't have proximity to. So if you didn't think about it from the lens of someone who is single, who's moved across the country to move to California to work for a company, and now they're by themselves with no access to anyone, we might not have proximity to the pain and the challenge and the loneliness that that's causing. Or we might not have proximity to the fact that as a family member taking care of your kids and making sure all the devices are working, but you still have to get on that Zoom call. And guess what? I'm taking classes at night, so I'm trying to make that work too. We might not have proximity to the difficulties that you're dealing with. Or for some people, the death of George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery maybe left you feeling like you're living in a country where literally you are not valued, your humanness isn't seen or valued, yet you still have to come to work and turn in that deliverable that's due on Tuesday and jump on that Zoom and smile and laugh all at the right times. So we might not have proximity to that, but part of being supportive is being open to hearing and understanding those different perspectives, and think about how we can make space as we all try to get through some of the challenges that life's throwing at us as we get our work done. So I think that is the challenge that's in front of us. So as I wrap up my formal comments and look forward to the conversation that we're going to have together, I think about this with two lenses. So obviously, I think about in the lens of the work that I do for a living, but specifically for you, I want you to hear in this message that the world needs your voice, your unique perspectives, everything that you have to bring to help us solve the problems in front of us. And I want us to be brave. I want us to be vulnerable. I want us to be curious. I want us to support the needs of others. And I think the more that we do that, we're going to create a better world, better products, better solutions for the challenges that will lay in front of us coming forward. So with that, that's sort of my formal comments. I'm going to stop sharing and just would love to open it up to your questions, what you're curious to talk about. It could be something that you saw in the deck, something that we didn't talk about, but really excited to hear what's on your mind.